Little Ones, the Sleep Manual Podcast. Welcome to the Little Ones Podcast, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm here with my Little Ones co-founder, Amanda.
Hi.
And we are friends, mothers, and creators of the Little Ones Sleep programs, which have helped over 300,000 families around the world with their baby and toddler's sleep. On our podcast today, we are jumping into the huge topic of self-settling. Dun, dun, dun.
Yes, we are. And we are going to explore so many things to do with self-settling. So first of all, understanding self-settling. The signs of readiness, of learning when your baby might need to self-settle. Setting up for success with self-settling. How to approach self-settling and everything in between. It is such a huge topic, so let's get into it.
But it is a very important topic because, as you will see as we explain, this is one of the absolute big ticket things that is going to help your little one sleep better. What else happens? Yeah, this is the key.
Yeah, it's the skill that we all need to learn no matter what age. But not all. That's
exactly right. So let's start by looking at what self-settling is, because there are a few misconceptions out there which we'll also touch on. So, I mean, at the end of the day, self-settling is basically, when you boil it all down, anybody's ability, your baby's ability, your toddler's ability to fall asleep independently without needing active settling from you or from someone else. So just like we ourselves would fall asleep, they're able to go to bed when they're good and ready, they close their eyes and they fall asleep without intervention, essentially, without you needing to rock them or pat them or feed them or take them for a ride in the car or push them around in the stroller just to get them to sleep. So they can settle themselves to sleep.
Yeah, and it's just so important. And the reason why it is so important comes into play around that sort of 2 to 3 to 4 month mark, which is often called the 4-month sleep regression, where babies do need to learn this skill. And it will create your naps to be longer. It will mean that your baby is able to sleep better overnight. It consolidates your night sleep earlier, and meaning that your baby's night sleep will be uninterrupted overnight. And
your night sleep will be uninterrupted.
Yeah, that's right. Your night sleep's not interrupted. So it's just so beneficial for both babies and parents once they've learnt the skill.
So there are, like I said, a few misconceptions and myths around self-settling, and we hear all sorts in our line of work. And actually, self-settling has been thrown around hand in hand with the phrase self-soothing. And I think ultimately perhaps people do consider this to be the same thing, in that if your baby is soothing themselves to sleep, I guess that's one way of looking at it. But self-soothing,
there's like a misconception, if they're soothing themselves then they're crying,
they're upset. Yeah, that's right. So I mean, and I think people often say self-soothing has to mean that your baby is upset and crying at any point of the day, not just in relation to sleep. And then they associate that with a very young baby learning that no one's coming to help them if they're crying, and a sense of abandonment, and that the baby has to learn to soothe itself in any situation that it's upset, which is completely not what we're talking about today. And no. Actually, it's completely not what we would advocate in any scenario, is your baby having to soothe themselves just during the day if they're upset. We are talking about your little one being able to settle themselves to sleep. So it doesn't necessarily mean that your baby is distressed. It doesn't necessarily mean that your baby has to go through extended periods of crying either on this process of self-settling, which is another myth out there, that it has to involve sleep training and cry it out sleep training and extinction sleep training and all of these things that we've heard about. It doesn't have to involve these things. That's definitely a myth out there.
So there are some pretty key signs of your baby showing readiness for learning the skill of being able to self-settle around that 3-4 month mark, around that 4-month sleep regression mark. They will start showing that if they can't self-settle, they are catnapping during the day. They're waking after 30 or 40 minutes through their nap and not being able to resettle themselves back to sleep and not being able to sleep for longer periods during the day. Then at night time, they'll often wake after one sleep cycle at sort of bedtime. So that first sleep cycle, they might wake after 35 to 45 minutes. And then from there on, if they're waking every 2 hours, they're showing the signs of needing to learn that skill of self-settling. They also will become a bit more grisly even when they are going to bed. They're protesting a little bit more. And again, that's just another sign. So the reason that they catnap during the day is because our sleep cycles are 30 to 45 minutes during the day, and they're waking up after a full sleep cycle. And then at night time, that first few sleep cycles are a day sleep cycle, and then once melatonin kicks in, they change to a 2-hour sleep cycle. So again,
let's talk about
waking up.
The reason why your baby's suddenly doing this. So we will have and do another podcast specifically on the 4-month sleep regression, but in a nutshell, what happens at this point is prior to this, your little one has been drifting quite easily through sleep cycles because they're not as differentiated in those newborn months. Then once your little one reaches close to 4 months old, there is definitely a change and a maturation in their sleep, and they start rousing completely between sleep cycles rather than staying in a light sleep and drifting into another sleep cycle. So your little one is waking up entirely, and this is actually how we sleep as adults. It's how our older children sleep. It's just we're very good at sleep, most of us, at this age, and so we just roll over and go back to sleep and don't actually realize that we've woken at the end of each of these sleep cycles. If your little one is relying on you actively settling them to sleep, so feeding them or rocking them to get them to go to sleep, that's the only way they know how to go to sleep. So then when they're coming out of this sleep cycle during the day or overnight, they're fully awake now, they're aware, they're going, hang on a minute, I need to go back to sleep, but I don't know how to go back to sleep unless mum is rocking me or dad is patting my back or I'm being fed to sleep or I've got my pacifier.
They're also aware that that thing is missing. They were being cuddled or fed or rocked, and it's missing. It would be just like if you woke up in the middle of the night and your blankets were missing. They're not there anymore, so something is different. It's made them fully wake up rather than just drift into another sleep cycle because it's different now.
Yeah, and they don't know how to go back to sleep without that thing there, because that's essentially the only way that they had learnt how to sleep. So we have taught them this, we have said to them, this is how you go to sleep. It's by me feeding you and me rocking you, and that's totally fine. And definitely in a very young newborn baby, I mean, that's perfect because you've got to get them to sleep at that point.
In a newborn, the way they go to sleep doesn't affect how long they sleep, like Nikki said. No. Whereas once they do have that development change around 4 months, the way they go to sleep directly affects how long they sleep for. So that is where we need to teach them how to self-settle.
So if your newborn or your young baby was napping a lot better, perhaps sleeping in some longer chunks overnight, and then suddenly they start catnapping during the day and waking a lot more frequently overnight, and they're sort of over 3 months old, then it's definitely time to start looking at moving towards self-settling. So we would always say that you should never approach self-settling in isolation. You should never just suddenly one day say, all right, I'm going to sleep train my baby. I'm going to teach them to self-settle. We need to set up the success. We need to make sure that everything is lined up perfectly so that any kind of self-settling work you do is going to be more successful. So let's talk about how we would do that, Amanda.
Yeah, so I think always with anything that we do with our sleep program or any advice that we would give to anybody is that you have to know what's happening during the day. We have to check that they've got the ideal sleep during the day. They're not sleeping too much, they're not sleeping not enough, because we need to hit those right awake windows if we're going to teach them how to go to sleep, because we want them to be perfectly ready to be able to sleep. And then the only thing that you're removing is yourself from the equation. So establishing the perfect daytime routine, we're lining up those awake windows, we're making sure the naps are on point, that the nap lengths are great.
What we very often see, and what you want to avoid, is if your little one is having, say, too many naps during the day and not enough awake time, and they're coming into bedtime in the evening, and you're trying to do some work on self-settling, your baby's just not tired enough in any case to go to sleep, so they're going to start fighting that as a result. The opposite is true if they haven't had enough sleep during the day, which is probably the case if they're in the habit of catnapping. Then they're very overtired. So immediately they're like then physiologically they're going to be fighting anything you do to self-settle. It's just not going to be as successful. There's going to be a lot more tears.
For sure. It's like trying to get yourself to go to sleep when you've been out partying, or you've been out late, you're a bit overtired, you're overstimulated or whatever, and then you're still again then going to try and teach them this new skill. It's just not going to happen. No. So lining up that routine, making sure that the awake windows are perfect, so that then you can teach them how to self-settle. The next thing would be the sleep environment. The sleep environment is crucial to getting your baby to sleep easily. I know myself, I'm not going to go to sleep easily if I'm in a bright room, if there's lights on, if there's lots of
you can
noise.
Hear something in the other room.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, so making sure you've got a dark room, having white noise. Now, not just normal white noise. If I was teaching self-settling, I would put on our baby sleep track, because it is a special type of white noise. It initiates the calming reflex, which is unlike any other white noise that you can do. It you just naturally, even we hold babies, if they're crying, you'll naturally start shushing them. So if they're able to hear that noise, they're able to calm themselves, they are able to listen to it. Now, babies under 6 months are only able to do one thing at a time. So if they're listening, they can't cry. So if you've got that white noise on, they're listening to it, they physically aren't able to actually cry at that same time. So they're able to calm themselves.
We trick them into silence.
Trick them into sleeping well. The next thing would be other positive sleep associations, like making sure that young babies are swaddled, or if they're in a sleeping bag, we've got the white noise. In older babies, we can have a cuddly or some sort of toy, a lovey that they're able to hold on to, and some will use that. They'll rub it on their eyebrows, or they'll both of our kids rubbed it on their top lip.
Yeah, mine used to have hers like rub it all over her face when she was falling asleep.
Yeah, and they do this too when they've got their swaddles as well. If they have the arms up swaddle, which I use, they will rub with the swaddle on their face to help them go to sleep. And that's just they're teaching themselves to do that. And then babies over 7 months old, if you are teaching the art of self-settling, they can have a pacifier at this point, I guess, because you probably don't want to remove too many things, and a pacifier is able to be taught to be able to put back in themselves at that point.
And if you're moving away from an association of feeding your little one to sleep, at this age, from 7 months-ish onwards, using a pacifier is a really easy way to do that, because they're still used to that sucking, which is actually the association that they're used to.
And it's such a strong association that, as Nikki said, swapping it for sucking on you to sucking a pacifier is going to be easier.
But as long as you teach them how to replace it themselves, because otherwise that's a whole new kettle of fish. If they can't do that. But that's easy enough to do during the day. And then the last thing that we would suggest to help set up the success of whatever self-settling you're going to start working on is just consistency, especially around things like a bedtime routine. Just adding in a nice, consistent, predictable bedtime routine is one of the easy steps, similar to the sleep environment. It's something really easy that you can implement and replicate every single night. Bath, brushing their teeth, if they have teeth, a story, a song, a milk feed, into their swaddle or their sleeping bag, into their bed, sleepy
Get on the
phrase,
white noise.
and that's it. Yeah, the same steps repeated in the same order are going to be really strong cues to your little one that sleep is coming next. So all of these things, the getting the daytime routine right, getting the sleep environment right, having a bedtime routine, all of implementing other positive sleep associations for your little one, all of these things are going to seriously positively impact your chances of getting your little one to self-settle. And without these elements, it's going to be a lot harder, and there will be tears from them and probably also from you.
And I think this is probably where people end up going wrong and go, I couldn't sleep train my baby, or sleep training's so bad because, their baby's crying or all the time. But I think if they've missed out any one of these steps first before trying to teach self-settling, as Nikki said, they're just going to cry. And nobody is going to know why.
I remember some terrible advice I got with my eldest, and we all know how clueless I was when I had my first baby. And it was actually from a Plunkett nurse of all people.
Gosh.
And she...
So like a midwife, Kiratani nurse.
Yeah, sort of. And... Michaela was maybe, young, like I want to say like 3-4 months old. And I was saying at sort of must have been a regular appointment that she was waking up all through the night, and what could I do about it? And not once did she ask me what naps is she having or how is she going to sleep or anything like that. Nothing. Her only advice was to do... a verbal reassurance method from outside the room from day one. So as in, put her in her room. If she starts screaming, wait for 15 minutes, I'm pretty sure she said. Then from outside the room, say, it's okay, darling. And then wait for another 15 minutes. And then...
Oh my God, that wouldn't even work for like a 3-year-old.
I know. I genuinely tried this because it was a healthcare professional had recommended me this method. And I remember I did it for one night and I was like, this can't be right. Like, I just, it felt wrong. She was really upset. And obviously, in hindsight, I look back at that now and it fully disgusts me that I was told to do that.
Many other things could have been done first. I know. And then it may have worked. But
and I know now I can think about the situation, and I didn't actually really even feed her to sleep or anything back then. In hindsight, it was genuinely just to do with her nap structure during the day. Yeah. And if someone had said to me, just tweak that, we could have avoided that. And I'm so grateful. I'm so glad that I used my intuition and didn't continue with that method because... Yeah, it was pretty stressful. No, it wouldn't have worked. And it would have been... Well,
it would have worked maybe after about a week or so.
Of her realising that no one was coming to help her.
And that she is just, it's so boring and, you're just going to have to sleep eventually.
So you definitely need to get all this stuff right first. And we would never, ever, ever recommend to anybody to embark on any kind of sleep training or teaching self-settling until they had all this other stuff lined up first. So then if we're ready, Amanda, we're in the hot seat, how are we actually approaching this self-settling beast?
So if we're looking at how to approach self-settling, we're going to look at our baby's current sleep association, and the goal is to eventually just do less and less of it and wean back. And look at this. So you would do the sleep association, whether it's feeding them or rocking them or whatever. You would do that first to help soothe them, but not so that they're falling asleep. Mm-hmm. And then you give them the chance to try and go to sleep by themselves. You have to give them the chance. Otherwise, they're never going to learn the skill.
Let's use it as, let's do a specific example, like a use case. So say your baby is used to being rocked in your arms. You get everything right during the day, the sleep environment's right, you've got the positive sleep associations in place. It comes to bedtime, you give them a rock because that's what they're used to.
What we would say to do is actually we would always start with doing, if you're teaching self-settling, to start with the naps during the day rather than at night time. Because the naps during the day, it's easier for everybody.
It's less confronting.
Especially you. It's less confronting during the day if you are helping them learn the skill during the day rather than
especially
at 3 o'clock in the morning.
That first morning is always the easiest one to get.
Yeah, the
don't
first
start
morning
it with the late afternoon nap.
At
like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's
the
never going to work.
worst one.
Yeah.
No, the first nap of the day is always the easiest to get them to sleep. They're super sleepy. They've got some nighttime melatonin still running through, and they're super tired. So that's the easiest one to start with. So
you're going to rock them. Yes, you're going to rock them a little bit to get them in the zone. Then you're going to put them in their bed and give them and see what happens. You're going to put them in their bed and pray. And then
they'll probably protest that first time, but we've got to give them a chance. And we've got to make sure that we're hitting the awake window too, because if that window is shut, it's shut.
Yeah. So then if the idea is if your little one is getting very upset and you're uncomfortable by how upset they're getting, then you can do the thing that you do. So in this example, you can rock them to soothe them because that's what they're used to. But just don't let them fall asleep. Pop them back in their bed. And then the goal is to do this ultimately until they eventually fall asleep. And you know what? Sometimes it messes itself up. Sometimes one of those times you'll pick them up and rock them and they'll just fall asleep on you. And you know what? You just try again next time.
If they're a baby under 6 months and you've been trying for the full nap time, then what you would do towards the end of the sort of 45 minutes at that first nap, at the 45-minute mark of trying, you would just eventually rock them to sleep.
Put them to sleep because they just need to sleep. It's non-negotiable.
At that point, they need to just go to sleep.
Yeah. And then you just try again next time.
Yeah.
But you do need to give them that chance. And then over the course of a week, a few days to a week, especially if you've got a younger baby, every time you just soothe them with their sleep association less and less, until eventually you probably just give them a quick little cuddle, pop them in, and they're able to go off to sleep. And the younger they are, the easier this is going to be, because when it's an older baby, they've got a very ingrained sleep habit and they're going to very loudly protest this change. So
there's definitely going to be some resistance, especially in babies over 6 months. You've got to think they've had 6 months of going to sleep a certain way, and now all of a sudden you're asking them to learn a completely new way of going to sleep. And toddlers even more so, and they are well aware that they can protest. You are going to have to be aware that there will be some protesting of the chain and protesting, but you have to give them the chance. So they are learning a new skill, just like teaching them how to walk. You've got to give them the chance to actually walk. You can't just jump in there and hold their hand, carry them.
Keep carrying them the whole time.
But there's nothing wrong with them. They are learning. And crying is the only way that they can communicate. So they are just learning.
So let's talk a little bit then about crying, because this is a little bit taboo when we're talking about sleep training. Nobody wants to think about their child crying, but let's be honest, your baby cries multiple times a day for many reasons.
And they're just going to cry more and more and more as they get older.
Yeah, because some babies cry because they're having their diaper changed, or because they've gone in the bath and it was colder than they expected, or it doesn't mean that
you've given the child the wrong color plate, or the wrong spoon.
That's exactly right. But we would never say you definitely have to do X amount of time of your child crying. You really just can work to your comfort level in regards to that. It will take a bit longer if you are adverse to your child crying at all. But it's important also to understand the different types of crying, because not all crying is there's something wrong with me crying. Remember, this is the only way they can communicate. Often it's protest, which you will identify, because the protest crying is this insistent, loud, it's like, wah, wah, wah. It's like they're like literally you can hear the shout in the crying. And they're basically saying, come back here and rock me to sleep, you stupid woman. And, do what I'm used to. Like, you can tell that that's what they're saying.
I'm tired. I want to go to sleep.
Come and help me. And if my children, when my kids were little, if they were doing something like that, I'm kind of like, you're actually okay. You're protesting a change. Like, you're there for them if they're genuinely upset or, the crying is winding up. So I was always quite comfortable to leave my babies if they were in that situation, because you just listen. If it does start to wind up, you step in.
And I think also, in the grand scheme of things, if you actually timed it of how long they are crying or protest crying, if you jump in there straight away, it's been like 1 or 2 seconds, it's not actually that long to give them the chance. Whereas if you are giving them the chance, it might only be a 1-minute cry, which in the grand scheme of things isn't actually that long. It feels like a lifetime to you because your baby's crying, and of course, like, it pulls on all the heartstrings. But I was the same as Nikki. I would turn the shush track up that we would have playing, because I know that soothes them as well, and I would turn that up. And personally, I would set a 6-minute timer, and 9 times out of 10 they would be asleep by minute 2. Like, not long at all in the grand scheme of things.
We have to think about, if we're talking about crying, while we're talking about crying, is that if your baby does not learn to self-settle, they are going to be a very overtired baby all of the time, because they're only having fractured naps and they're waking up multiple times, potentially every 2 hours overnight. So they're going to be a very tired baby. So they're going to cry a lot more during the day, a lot more, in fact, than they ever would during any kind of self-settling that you're working through with them, actually. Like, they're going to be crying far more because they're overtired.
And probably you as well, because you're tired.
You're going to be crying.
You're going to be crying, or just losing it. Like, I know when I'm tired, my rope is very short. So, like, I lose things very quickly. If I'm tired, you'll be doing the same. And sometimes you just have to push through and teach them this skill.
I mean, let's look then at, there's the other type of crying that we should mention. There's winding down crying, which you will notice, because these cries are more like grizzly. They end up grizzly cries. They get further and further apart. You can tell it's literally winding down. It's like they just need to do it before they go to sleep. They just need to go, I'm over it. I'm tired. I want to go to sleep. I'm going to sleep. It's like these kids probably grow up to be chatterboxes, I guarantee it. It's like they just have to let it out before they go to sleep. And I mean, I would always leave a child in this situation, because this is actually a positive sign. They're winding themselves down. It's not because they've given up and they know no one's coming. It's because they're just having a little grizzle. They're winding down before they go to sleep. The opposite of that is winding
the opposite,
up, which is where you would always pretty much intervene. This is when something is wrong with your child. These are loud cries. They're not shouts. They're heartfelt cries, and they get louder and they get closer together. The sobs get closer together. And I mean, you hear these ones, like you feel these cries. Where there is, your baby is upset.
But I think we do have to differentiate between that loud shouting protest cry versus the winding up cry. And I know that first-time parents think all cries are the winding up, and they're not. You just, if you are teaching the skill of self-settling, and every baby, every human has to eventually learn the skill of self-settling, that we have to give them the chance, and there will be some protesting. Unless you are literally putting something in their mouth like a dummy or a pacifier, their mouth will be open and be able to cry.
So, I mean, in a nutshell, what we're really looking at in terms of self-settling is, like we said, when your baby reaches around that 4-month regression age. But to be honest, there's no reason you can't start it sooner. And like we said, the younger the baby, the easier it is. You don't have to do it as sleep training. If you have a 2-month-old baby, there's no reason you can't just start popping them in their bed and seeing if they'll fall asleep on their own. Just try it. They might surprise you. In fact, they probably will fall asleep on their own if their daytime naps are right and their sleep environment is right and they've got a full tummy and they're well-winded.
I started with my second baby around 8 weeks, my first baby around 11 weeks. I started teaching them both of them, just giving them the chance because I knew what was coming. I gave them both the chance first to go to sleep in their bed. So starting earlier, they will still take a while to learn the skill, even at 2-3 months. And until they've learnt the skill, it will be a little bit hard. But yeah, it's so worth it in the end to get those good naps, those good nighttime sleeps.
So in any situation, make sure you're always setting up for success. So get that daytime perfect for their age. Get the sleep environment spot on, introduce the positive sleep associations, cuddly, sleeping bag, etc., and get a good nap time and bedtime routine happening. Then, of course, when you're looking at your actual method, work with your baby's current sleep association that they have with you. Don't try and do something different. Just do whatever you're doing, but do it less and less each time. You're weaning your baby off that association is the gist of it.
Yeah.
So, like we've said, this is a really crucial skill. It's a big, big topic. But it is one that once your baby has this, it's
they don't
gold.
Unlearn it.
Yeah, it is absolute gold.
Well, thanks for listening to this entire podcast and thanks for joining us today. Hopefully you've found some useful information and have taken away some methods that you might be able to teach your own baby how to self-settle. And don't forget to follow us on our social media channels and visit our website if you need any further help with your little one's sleep at www.littlenones.co. And if you need that sleep sound like we were mentioning throughout the podcast, it's on any of our streaming platforms.
Thanks for chatting with us today. We'll talk to you soon. This is Little Ones, the Sleep Manual Podcast.